Why? Here reunites Forrest Gump's Tom Hanks and Robin Wright after 30 really long years of Forrest Gump fans wanting to see them as a couple again. But this is not a Forrest Gump sequel. And I'm kind of surprised that some people actually thought that was exactly what they were getting. The film is directed by Robert Zemeckis, the legendary 80s and 90s director who gave us not only Forrest Gump, but arguably one of the best movies of the 80s, Back to the Future. Here is based off of the graphic novel written and illustrated by Richard Maguire, and that novel was based off of his comic strip series published in Raw Volume Number 2 in 1989. It was a film strip. The film is a generational story about families that all live in the same house or area in different generations, focusing on life, death, loss, growing old, and everything that just happens in life. It starts pretty linear in the beginning, showing dinosaurs walking where the house would be later, and then we see the asteroid destroy all the dinosaurs, and then it goes into the Ice Age, to the melting of the ice, and then we see the indigenous people, and finally we see the colonial period, and then the building of the house, and then it goes into the story of the people who lived there. From there, the first family moves in, John and Pauline Martyr. Not a really memorable family. John is obsessed with airplanes and Pauline hates the house. That's pretty much all we get from them. Another couple, Lee and Stella Beckman, are the next residents, and Lee invents the lazy boy. The next couple to live in the house, Al and Rose, played by Paul Bettany and Kelly Riley, is what most of the movie is based on. Them and Richard, their son, played by, of course, Tom Hanks. And there's also Robin Wright, who is Tom Hanks' future wife. And they're the sort of the center of the story. This movie is shot with one stationary camera in one place in one room, with the actors coming in and out of the shot. Most of the time they are coming really way too close to the camera when they have something to say, something really important to say, making the scenes really awkward and intrusive. It feels very much like a play on stage. I appreciate what Zemeckis tried to do with the camera that doesn't move throughout the entire movie, but to me it really doesn't work. It's following the graphic novel where every page is in the same room with boxes being overlaid to show different events happening at different times in the same space. But being in that same space for every scene gets really, really boring. I did appreciate the comic book-like boxes that come into frame, like the graphic novel, and how they use them as a transition to different time periods. But some transitions from one scene to another was like this weird morphing transition that I absolutely hated. And again, there are points to having a stationary shot, but the whole time, only because the graphic novel does the same thing for 300 pages. It wasn't fun for me to watch at all. All these things that coincidentally or planned that happen in this room are kind of ridiculous. Having a wedding, a funeral, giving birth, and all the important fights or dialogue happening in this one living room. The movie's based in Pennsylvania, and across the street you see Benjamin Franklin's house, or maybe it's his illegitimate son's house. But his redcoat son, who thinks his traitor father is crazy for wanting to rebel against the British, that was actually a pretty interesting scene. The problem was that they kept showing Benjamin Franklin for no real reason other than to say, remember Benjamin Franklin? He's across the street. He lives there. There's even one scene where they cut back and forth from Tom Hanks and some other guy dressed as Franklin at the house Halloween party, and then it crosses over to Franklin himself. I mean, they really loved Benjamin Franklin in this movie. I think you see him once in the novel, but they keep cutting back and forth to this guy for some weird reason. Robert Zemeckis has always been a revolutionary at finding a way to do the best special effects. The scenes in Forrest Gump where he interacts with famous historical figures was believable. And in Back to the Future, as a kid, I believed that DeLorean could actually fly and travel through time. But this AI software that de-ages Tom Hanks and Robin Wright was at times hard to look at. It wasn't the worst de-aging I've ever seen in a movie, but it was far from ready to be in a film, in my opinion. And like Scorsese's The Irishman, you had an old-sounding Tom Hanks and a young Tom Hanks body. It wasn't as bad as Robert De Niro, in The Irishman, but it was noticeable. This movie tries to be very emotional, but the scenes are so short and quick that you don't have time to really process or feel what the writer and director wants you to feel. You don't really process the pain of someone's death or being laid off. Something happens, good or bad, so quickly, and then they move on to the next scene right away. There's really no time to let the character go through what they're going through emotionally. It was kind of the same thing with the other families that have lived in the house over the different time periods. They give you a scene about a family, then it moves to the main family, and later down the road you see that previous family, and you're like, oh yeah, those guys, what were they doing again? I don't remember. I was so incredibly bored during this movie, and I wanted to leave, but I didn't because I wanted to wait till the end because I had a suspicion that they were going to do something at the end, and I had to see if they did it. And of course they did. It was pretty predictable. And honestly, for me, it was the best part of the movie. The actual end is pretty predictable based on a couple of random comments by Robin Wright that she makes during mid-movie. But it did pay off, not in a great way, but I liked the ending, and that was the best part of the movie. It was the only time during the movie that I felt anything. Actually, there were two different scenes in the movie where I felt kind of emotional, but only two for such a sentimental movie like this one is a really bad sign. And I can get pretty emotional in a really great heartfelt film. This one really didn't do it for me. I didn't really care about the characters that much. I didn't get the time to know them because of those quick scenes. Don't get me wrong, Tom Hanks and Robin Wright did a great job, I thought. And Paul Bettany as Richard's dad was pretty great. Kelly Riley, who you may know from Yellowstone, also had a great performance. But the whole story was a non-linear, rushed, unemotional mess. The family that lived in the 2022 timeline, I actually wanted to see more of, but there wasn't any time for that. And their story was cheapened because of it. They had some great scenes, and it was just kind of pointless. There were a few funny moments, like when Richard pushes his brother off the couch face first on the ground, or Richard's wedding, where Richard's dad is trying to take a picture of the bride and groom, but every time he walks toward them, he unplugs his flash from the wall. It had its good moments, but sadly, it just doesn't have enough to keep going. Tom Hanks is an American icon. Everything from Splash to his original sitcom Bosom Buddies in the 80s, and all of his memorable characters from Big to, even David Pumpkins, honestly.
I'm David Pumpkins, man!
I love that skit. And Robin Wright was Princess Buttercup from The Princess Bride and was on the show House of Cards and was in so many other great movies. These actors deserved a better script, in my opinion. I appreciate Robert Zemeckis' ambition, but this was just a bold, creative move, and it was just terrible. The movie is just about normal life, good things that happen and bad things that happen, nothing extremely good or extremely bad, mostly the just expected. Your life and my life is probably more exciting than what happens in this movie. I think older people will like this movie. I think the younger generation probably won't as much. It is also about missed opportunities, things they all wanted to do but didn't because they had a family, I guess. There's one really great line in the movie about how worrying about everything won't stop bad things from happening. I really like that line. I thought it was pretty good. Overall, here has some great acting, but the story is just a rush mess. The director expects us to feel a certain way in so many different scenarios, but doesn't give us the time to process them so we can actually feel them. The one camera shot is really boring, and the special effects are notably bad. It's a Norman Rockwell-style piece of Americana that could have been really effective if the story was told the right way, instead of trying to be the graphic novel on film. Which, by the way, the novel was 300 pages, and I read it in 5 to 10 minutes, and it was even more unentertaining than the movie. I'll give here 1.5 stars for the creative try, and just for getting Forrest and Jenny back together again, or at least in my mind.
Run, Forrest, run!
I ran to get where I was going. I never thought it would take me anywhere.
Have you seen here? Do you plan to see it this weekend? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know if I was wrong about this one at all. Maybe I was wrong. I don't know. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this review, and remember, don't wait till it streams. Let's go to theaters and let's see it together.
Any questions?